Well, I finally managed to get back up to the UP yesterday. Actually had to head up Friday. Yesterday was Saturday to recover Sparky, our Wrangler Rubicon 4xe. It's actually my wife's Jeep, and yeah, I broke it on the last trip up to the UP. So in this video, I try to close a little bit of the story of what exactly happened to Sparky that caused him to be disabled, and what I'm going to do to prevent that from happening in the future. There's one nice thing about a Rubicon is he's not skimped. There's no skimpy undercarriage protection. That is stout. Like that, just like the Hummer H3, there's the Alpha. It's got some very heavy undercarriage protection on it, which is obviously not great for efficiencies, but when you get a little aggressive with the skinny pedal, it's nice to know something other than your oil pan or the equivalent is going to hit first. So, alright, the skid plate is off. Alright, that's good. The thing about the Rubicon, I gotta say the undercarriage protection is not super impressive. Definitely something I'll be wanting to upgrade on this Jeep. Alright, a quick situation report. The wrecker is on the way through Jeep Roadside Assistance as a branch inopportunely got up into, you can't see anything there, but got inopportunely up under the undercarriage of Sparky. SoftRoading the West had a video, and the same thing happened with a guy on a trip with them. So I got to get all the stuff off the Jeep. The wrecker will be here shortly. Other exciting news is forecast was 38 degrees. I got it, said, man, it feels a lot colder than that. And there was frost on the grass as I came up, and yeah, it's 28 degrees. So there's ice all over the Jeep. I was definitely not expecting that. I didn't even break out the propane heater last night. But the sun will be up soon, and unfortunately here in the dark I got to get started taking the stuff off the top of the Jeep. That's the reflection of my headlight there. So I've got to empty out the Thule and do a bunch of other stuff. Well, Kathy made it here this morning. So here's the rescue party, the old 2008 Hummer H3, and you can still see the puddle of transmission fluid underneath Sparky. I'll take the video. I've been researching undercarriage protection this morning. Hopefully no, can't think of the proper engineering term, but consequential damage of leaking the transmission fluid. Fortunately, obviously I couldn't drive far anyway. I just got where I could get and stopped immediately, but the leak got torn by a well-placed stick. Like I say in SoftRoading the West, the YouTuber tells a story, I think his name's Donald, where he's out with a Wrangler 4xe. Same thing happened to that guy. Nothing hardcore, but a well-placed stick tore out a transmission line in some way. Transmission fluid leaked, and he had to be basically towed out of the forest. Fortunately, when mine was no longer operable, I was right at a driveway where the tow was easy. So I'm here at the dealership where Sparky has been waiting. Very excited to get him home. I got the light bar from the Hummer illuminating things. I'll do this one more time because I don't think I was recording. It's crawling around on the asphalt and everything. Well, take two will be better. So again, the Rubicons, at least the 2 liters, have this vulnerability, and you can really see it right there. That is no bueno. And I believe it was this fitting right here. I'll look back at it. I took a video of it. I believe that's the one that got taken out, and you can see it. It doesn't take a lot to get up in there. So yeah, that was not good. But I've got MetalCloak coming, which I believe will take out these cross members and a lot of this other stuff and replace it with some heavier steel. Going back, I gotta say, that's not terrible undercarriage protection. That's at least on par with other vehicles I have owned. But this right here, you know, that little splash guard they call a skid plate underneath the factory bumper through your oil pan and transmission. So that's just shameful. There's just nothing there. And of course that's where it got hit. Yeah, I didn't even notice those lines are just begging to be torn out. So we'll see what it looks like after metal coat. This bit here I don't think is going to be protected though, so that's a little scary. That stuff is very exposed. All right. I've got to go get Fred and come back when the dealership is open. So there are lots of options out there for improving the undercarriage protection even of a Rubicon. So I did some research and learned that there are a lot of complaints about JL undercarriage, not just the obvious issue around the engine and the 4xe, but also about the strength of the cross members. So while there are a lot of systems out there, I opted for MetalCloak, which not only protects the engine, as shown in a still provided by Chris from their customer service. In my first question, I sent them a still, as shown here in the video, of this is what broke. Will your system prevent this from happening? And I got a nice picture back showing, yes, the system will prevent that from happening. So I then did some more research, and is it worth replacing the rest of the undercarriage protection? Because honestly, it's not that bad toward the back of the truck. And based upon my research, I would say yes. Again, just because supposedly the cross members have, supposedly guys like on Jeep Safari came back with twisted steel back there. So I haven't received a MetalCloak yet. When I do, I'll do a video showing the complete install. Now I'm also going to plop on here some video without hopefully enraging all the keyboard warrior Jeep guys out there. I just want to show what the 2008 Hummer Alpha has around its engine. I would say this 2022 Rubicon is probably better protected toward the back of the truck, but I was honestly stunned at how little protection there is around all those delicate lines around the engine itself. So again, I'll pop some video in here that will show the Hummer H3 by comparison. And yeah, when I change the oil in my Hummer, I have to take out 4 bolts and drop the skid plate and put it back in when I'm done. It's really not that big a deal. And I don't know if you can tell from the video, but yeah, those skid plates are pretty banged up over the last 14 years. And just reinforcing they're there for a reason. Obviously, it's independent front suspension, so it needs protection in a different way. But nevertheless, anything sensitive like that in my Hummer is behind 2 very large skid plates. All right, so again, I don't know how obvious that is, but there is the skid under the engine. See the CV coming out there. You can see a little bit of moisture there around the seal. You can see the steering. And again, it's an independent front suspension application, so it's not the same thing as a solid axle Jeep. And you can see that skid plate takes a lot of abuse, man. It's like putting it on and off. Sometimes I have to take it off, knock it around. Sometimes I just have to kind of muscle it with some extra oomph. But as you approach the front of this truck, I've had Jeep guys like, well, you should slow down. And then they surprise when I, you know, kind of mash the skinny pedal and pop out of a bog, and they're like, oh, I get it. I'm like, yeah, you know, it's very little chance of something coming up here and damaging the front end of the truck in that manner. Now, in fairness, I'll show the back end there too, because I would say the Rubicon, to me, has a better skid package farther back. I was more impressed at the back end of the truck. Now, the MetalCloak is going to replace that too, but still, it's amazing to me that that was left, the engine in a Rubicon, again, at least on a 4xe or a 2-liter 4, that all that stuff was less protected. So again, here, that's not super impressive, right? The skid protection, there's some vulnerable components there. So I would say, you know, more toward the back. I really did like the Rubicon's protection. So I've noticed, like, the first thing when I hear a bang, it's either this spring hanger hitting a rock, or, you know, any aspect by the back axle. So all that stuff could use better protection. Again, the fuel tank is very well protected. That's a really heavy steel skid. That's kind of wimpy right there, right? That little kind of dangling guard there to protect this, the transfer case. But again, the engine is massively protected. So there's no way I would lose a transmission like that, line like that, on this truck. Now, if you're a Jeep guy, you just want to get on the keyboard and hate, it's up to you. There's a really good video out there. A good off-roader took the new Bronco out, started talking about similar things, and he said, you know, look under here, and the Bronco has way more vulnerabilities than that Rubicon 4xe has. So I think the car companies should just be careful. You know, they end up selling a truck that's off-road capable. All right, so what's the upshot of all this? So I drove through the woods on a trip in the UP. Before I left, I made sure I put a winch on there and I put the bars across the hardtop because I told myself, discussed it at length with my wife, I'm not going to take Sparky up to the land in the UP solo without making some changes to make sure that it can handle it. One change was to mount the winch. I got that done, stayed up till 1 a.m. mounting that winch. And you can see in the audio from the beginning of this video, as I'm doing it, I'm like, man, between this nice, stiff front skid plate, but honestly, it's more of a splash guard because it doesn't go back very far, all the way back to the transfer case, there's not a lot of protection there. And I should have listened to myself. So instead, I went up there, drove around the woods, and sure enough, just like other people, and I had seen that video from SoftRoading the West before, I knew it was a risk. And sure enough, at some point, a branch got up in there, tore out that transmission line, you know, broke it right at the aluminum block where there's no way you're going to patch that up. Tore it down below the oil pan, and then you lose your transmission fluid and you can't go anymore. So what's the great lesson? You know, listen to your instincts. I was sitting there under the Jeep that night. It was up till 1 a.m. getting that winch in there, and I told myself, man, there's not a lot of protection back here. So better preparedness. If you're a Boy Scout, Semper Paratus, you know, always prepared. I should have listened to myself and not taken Sparky up into the forest until I at least had the engine skid plate sourced and installed. So hopefully within the next week I'll receive that MetalCloak system, and like I say, I'll do a video of its replacement. But lesson learned, when you see an obvious vulnerability like that, don't talk yourself into, oh, it'll be okay for me. In my case, I was fortunate. I got out of the woods without a massively expensive recovery. However, $688 in repairs, a hotel room for the night before, and a lot of gas on it was basically about a 5.5, 6 hour drive from our house back to the dealership where Sparky had to be repaired. And a real shout out to Riverside Auto Sales up there in Escanaba, Michigan. They really were very fair, very prompt, very responsive. I'd rather not spend that kind of money for a broken transmission line housing, I guess you could call it. It's really an aluminum block. It's not just the hose itself. But, you know, obviously the factory part, the very expensive Mopar transmission fluid, I'd rather have not spent all that money, but I can't say enough about how responsive they were. Good quality work, and very, very appreciative of that part of the misadventure. And my wife still loves me. I broke her brand new Jeep, but she forgave me and I brought it back to her. She's out zooming around now with it. All right, so that's about all I got to say on this video. Probably more later on the adventure itself, but that's the story of Sparky and the big stick, the moral lesson of preparedness, and the good news is Sparky's back on the road and MetalCloak undercarriage protection is on the way.